Vivid verses.
Marcus Harding understood numbers the way most people understood breathing. Unconsciously, effortlessly. At 34, he had spent the better part of a decade building Vantage Analytics from a one-man operation in a converted warehouse into the invisible backbone of Portland's marketing elite. The offices of Vantage Analytics occupied the third floor of a nondescript building on Burnside Street, where the rent was reasonable and the foot traffic non-existent. Marcus preferred it that way. His company didn't need the glossy veneer that his wife's firm cultivated. Vantage sold truth, distilled into algorithms and probability models that told clients exactly which campaigns would succeed and which would hemorrhage money. He sat now at his desk, the LED monitors casting a pale glow across his features as he reviewed the latest performance metrics. Tuesday evening, 7:30 p.m., and the office was empty except for him. On his main screen, data streamed from the latest campaign analysis. Meridian Creative Agency had launched a regional push for Cascade Coffee Roasters 3 weeks ago. The creative was excellent. Marcus could admit that much. His wife's firm knew how to craft narratives that resonated. But the targeting had been his. Conversion rate up 18.3% over projected baseline, he noted. Customer acquisition cost down 12%. Meridian will present these numbers as proof of their creative genius, and they'll be partially right. But remove the targeting engine, and those same campaigns would perform at 62% efficiency. Maybe less. The partnership with Meridian Creative had been his wife's idea, proposed over dinner at a French restaurant 3 years ago. Victoria had ordered the Coke au vin and sketched the vision on a napkin between bites. "My brother and I have the creative vision," she'd said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We have the client relationships, the brand presence, the awards. But we're missing the precision, the data backbone. That's you, Marcus." He'd listened, asked questions, run preliminary models over the following week. The synergy made sense on paper. The partnership would be formalized through a strategic services agreement, with Vantage licensing its proprietary technology to Meridian in exchange for a percentage of campaign revenues and guaranteed minimums. More importantly, the contract had included a clause that Marcus had insisted on during negotiations, the key man provision. If the partnership dissolved for any reason, clients would retain the right to terminate their contracts with Meridian if Vantage Analytics was no longer providing the underlying data services. Victoria's brother, Nathan, had barely glanced at the clause. "Sure, whatever you need," he'd said. "This is going to be transformative." He'd been right, though perhaps not in the way he'd anticipated. Over 3 years, Meridian's revenue had grown by 340%. They'd expanded into a renovated space in the Pearl, hired a dozen new creatives, and won industry recognition. Victoria had been profiled in Portland Business Journal as one of the city's rising entrepreneurs. Marcus had continued running Vantage from his modest offices on Burnside, maintaining the infrastructure that made Victoria's ascent possible. The work suited him. He enjoyed the intellectual challenge of optimizing algorithms, the satisfaction of watching conversion rates climb as his models grew more sophisticated. He didn't need recognition. He had something more valuable, leverage. Not that he'd thought about it in those terms initially. The marriage had been good, or at least functional. Victoria traveled frequently for client meetings and industry conferences. Marcus worked late, lost in code and statistical analysis. They maintained a beautiful loft in the Pearl District, hosted dinner parties for Victoria's colleagues, elegant affairs where Marcus played the role of the quietly accomplished husband. He'd noticed the shift about 6 months ago. Small things initially. Victoria's tone when discussing his work, a subtle condescension that crept into her voice. The way she'd pause before answering when friends asked what her husband did, as if the question required translation into something more palatable. Marcus runs the analytics side. She'd say the emphasis making it sound technical, specialized, slightly boring. He's brilliant with numbers and data modeling. Very behind-the-scenes work. Behind the scenes, Marcus thought, pulling up the client roster on his secondary monitor. 83% of Meridian's revenue comes from accounts that contractually require Vantage's technology. Behind the scenes, but load-bearing. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria, staying late at the office. Don't wait up. Third time this week. The pattern was familiar by now. Victoria would come home after midnight, exhausted, exhilarated from whatever creative breakthrough had kept her. She'd pour a glass of wine, decompress by scrolling through her phone, and fall asleep on the couch. They existed in parallel, two lives running on separate tracks that occasionally intersected for dinner parties or quarterly reviews. It wasn't unhappy exactly. It was simply hollow. The dinner party was Victoria's idea, naturally. 8 guests, carefully curated to represent the intersection of Portland's creative and business communities. Marcus had spent Saturday afternoon preparing his signature dish, seared scallops with cauliflower puree and pancetta, while Victoria arranged flowers and fretted over the seating arrangement. By 7 p.m., the guests had arrived, and the loft buzzed with the particular energy of people who made their livings from ideas and aesthetics. "These scallops are incredible," Sarah Holloway said, savoring another bite. "Marcus, you're wasted in analytics. You should open a restaurant." "The failure rate for restaurants in the first year is 60%. Marcus replied with a slight smile. 75% within 3 years. "I prefer industries with better odds." Polite laughter circled the table. Victoria interjected smoothly. "Marcus sees everything through probability models. It's his superpower." "Superpower," Marcus noted, said with the same inflection someone might use for quirk or eccentricity. Affectionate dismissal. Nathan launched into a story about Meridian's recent campaign for a local brewery, describing the creative process with sweeping gestures. The table was wrapped. "The breakthrough came when we realized we weren't selling beer," Nathan said, leaning forward. "We were selling belonging, community, the feeling of being part of something authentic. And the data validated that insight beautifully," Victoria added. "When we targeted the campaign toward people who valued local community engagement, the response rate was 40% higher than our initial demographic models." Those demographic models were mine, Marcus thought. And the 40% improvement came from the audience segmentation algorithm I developed specifically for that campaign. But to present it as validation of creative insight rather than the foundation that made the insight actionable, that's the narrative Victoria prefers. He said nothing. This wasn't the venue for corrections or credit claiming. Dinner concluded, and the group moved to the living area. Marcus found himself on the couch with David from Cascade Coffee. "I'll be honest," David said quietly. "When Meridian first pitched us, I was skeptical. But your targeting models are in a completely different league. We're seeing customer lifetime values that are 30% higher than our previous campaigns. That's not creative brilliance. That's mathematical precision. The creative and the analytics work together," Marcus said diplomatically. David nodded but pressed the point. "Sure, but if I had to choose one or the other, I can find creative talent anywhere in this city. What you've built, that's proprietary advantage." Before Marcus could respond, Victoria appeared. "David, you're not trying to poach my husband, are you?" "Just telling him he's underselling himself," David replied with a grin. Victoria's smile was radiant, practiced. "Don't I know it?" The party wound down around 11. After the guests departed, Marcus began clearing dishes while Victoria collapsed onto the couch. "Did you hear, David?" Victoria said eventually, not looking up from her phone. "Going on about your algorithms like you'd invented electricity." It's so typical of engineers to not understand the bigger picture. David understands the value proposition, Marcus said. He's seeing measurable ROI from the targeting models. Right, but he's missing the point. The reason those campaigns work is because of the creative vision. The data just tells us if we're reaching people. The creative is what makes them care. Interesting reframe, Marcus thought. Reduce the analytics to mere measurement rather than the targeting engine that determines who sees the creative in the first place. He finished cleaning in silence. When the kitchen was spotless, Marcus retired to his study and opened the partnership agreement. The key man clause, Section 7.3, Paragraph 2. In the event of dissolution of the strategic partnership, all clients shall retain the right to terminate existing contracts if Vantage Analytics is no longer providing data services. He pulled up the current client roster. 83 contracts. Of those, 68 explicitly required Vantage's proprietary technology as a condition of service. If the partnership dissolved and those 68 clients exercised their termination rights, Meridian's annual revenue would drop from $17.4 million to approximately $2.6 million. Their staff overhead alone is running at $3.2 million annually. The company would be insolvent within 90 days. It was an academic exercise, of course. The partnership was stable. Still, Marcus saved the analysis to an encrypted folder. Knowledge was leverage, and leverage was insurance. The unraveling came on a Wednesday evening, 2 weeks after the dinner party. Marcus was working from home when Victoria came home just after 8. She dropped her bag by the door with more force than necessary. "We need to talk," she said, not bothering with preliminaries. Marcus saved his work and turned from his desk. Victoria stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "All right," he said calmly. "What's on your mind?" "This isn't working." She gestured vaguely at the space between them. "You and me. This whole arrangement. I can't do it anymore." Elevated heart rate, Marcus noted. She's been building to this conversation. This isn't spontaneous. It's a prepared speech. "What specifically isn't working?" he asked. Victoria laughed, a brittle sound. "That's so typical. You wanted to quantify it, break it down into data points you can analyze." "That's exactly the problem, Marcus. You're suffocating. Your whole world is numbers and algorithms and probability models. There's no passion, no creativity, no life. You're like a machine pretending to be human. I'm telling you I want a divorce, and you're taking notes in your head." She wants a reaction, Marcus realized. Emotional display, perhaps pleading or anger. She's built a narrative where I'm the passionless obstacle to her creative fulfillment. "I'm listening to what you're saying," Marcus replied. "You feel the relationship lacks emotional depth and creative vitality. You believe my analytical approach to life is incompatible with your needs. You want to end the marriage. Is that accurate?" "God, yes." "Exactly. I need room to breathe, Marcus. I need to be around people who understand art and beauty and meaning, not just conversion rates and performance metrics. I need to find myself again." Find herself, Marcus thought. Standard language. And that phrasing. Around people who understand, plural. She's already cultivating an alternative social circle. This has been developing for months. "All right," Marcus said. "If you want a divorce, we should proceed with that." Victoria blinked, momentarily thrown. "Just like that? You're not going to try to work things out, suggest counseling, anything?" "You've clearly given this significant thought. I don't see value in prolonging a situation that makes you unhappy. If you want to find yourself, you should have the freedom to do that." "Well," Victoria said, recovering, "I appreciate you being reasonable about this. I was worried you'd make it difficult." "I don't see the benefit in making it difficult," Marcus said. He opened his laptop and pulled up the partnership agreement. "Though we'll need to discuss the business implications. If we're dissolving the personal relationship, We should probably dissolve the professional partnership as well. Victoria waved a hand dismissively. Nathan and I will buy out your share, or we can maintain the partnership as a purely business relationship. That's just logistics. Just logistics, Marcus thought. She genuinely doesn't understand the structure. She thinks the partnership is about profit sharing, not realizing that the entire client base is contractually dependent on my infrastructure. I don't think a buyout makes sense, Marcus said. Without that personal connection, I prefer to return to operating Vantage as an independent entity. Fine, whatever, Victoria said, already moving toward the bedroom. Have your lawyer send the paperwork to Nathan. We'll figure out the transition. Marcus opened his email client and began drafting a message to his attorney. Brief, clinical, outlining the situation and requesting immediate preparation of dissolution documents for both the marriage and the strategic partnership. He pulled up the client contracts database and attached the relevant section to his email with a note. Please confirm that dissolution of the strategic partnership triggers the client termination rights outlined in Section 7.3. Then he drafted the formal notice that would inform clients of the partnership dissolution. Effective 30 days from the date of this notice, the strategic partnership between Vantage Analytics LLC and Meridian Creative Agency will be dissolved. Per the terms of your service agreement, this dissolution triggers your right to terminate the contract without penalty. From a bedroom, he could hear Victoria on the phone, her voice animated, sharing the news, framing the narrative. Let her have her narrative, Marcus thought. I just need to be accurate about the business implications. Around midnight, Victoria emerged. I'm going to stay with Nathan for a few days. Give us both some space. That makes sense, Marcus said. She left, and Marcus worked until 3 a.m. The notices went out on Monday morning, precisely 48 hours after Marcus's conversation with Victoria. His attorney had reviewed the language and expedited the process. 68 emails, each tailored to the specific contract language, each providing the required 30-day notice period. Marcus sent them at 9 a.m. and returned to his normal work. The first call came at 9:43. David from Cascade Coffee Roasters. Marcus, I just got your email about the partnership dissolution. Can you help me understand what this means for our account? The strategic partnership between Vantage and Meridian is ending, Marcus explained. Your contract includes a provision allowing you to terminate if Vantage is no longer providing the underlying analytic services. You have 30 days to decide whether you want to continue with Meridian alone, engage Vantage directly, or explore other options. Right, I see that in the contract language. But realistically, what happens if we stick with Meridian? Do they have comparable analytics capabilities in-house? Interesting, Marcus thought. He's already identified the core issue. That's a question you'd need to ask Meridian, Marcus said. I can't speak to their internal capabilities, but you could continue providing services directly to us, correct? That's certainly possible. Vantage has capacity to work with clients directly. By noon, Marcus had fielded 12 calls from clients. Nathan's call came at 1:30 p.m. What the hell did you do? I've had 15 clients call me this morning asking about contract terminations. Victoria and I are divorcing, Marcus said calmly. As I explained to her, it makes sense to dissolve the business partnership as well. I sent the required notices this morning per the terms of the Strategic Services Agreement. You can't just unilaterally end the partnership. We have contracts, obligations. I can actually, Marcus interrupted. Section 4.2 of our agreement allows either party to terminate with 90 days notice for any reason, or immediately in the event of material change in circumstances. A divorce qualifies as material change. My attorney has already filed the dissolution paperwork. Silence on the line. Nathan is processing, Marcus noted. This is insane, Nathan said, his voice rising. You're destroying both our companies over a divorce. That's completely irrational. I'm dissolving a business partnership that was predicated on a personal relationship that no longer exists, Marcus corrected. Vantage will be fine. We have a strong client base independent of Meridian, and several of your clients have already inquired about working with us directly. You son of a, Nathan caught himself. Okay. What do you want? More money? A bigger stake in Meridian? We can renegotiate the terms. And there it is, Marcus thought. The assumption that everything is negotiable. I'm not interested in renegotiation, Marcus said. The partnership served its purpose while it made sense for both parties. That's no longer the case. You're making a huge mistake, Nathan said. We have momentum, growth, recognition. You're giving up your stake in something significant. I'm giving up my stake in Meridian's growth, Marcus agreed. But that's acceptable. I prefer to focus on Vantage's growth going forward. After a long moment, Nathan asked, "Can we at least meet in person? Talk through the implications?" "I don't see what that would accomplish," Marcus said. "But if you'd like to discuss transition procedures, I'm available Thursday afternoon." By 5 p.m., Marcus had spoken with 27 clients. 17 had indicated they would likely terminate their Meridian contracts and either work with Vantage directly or explore other options. 17 out of 68. 25% confirmed losses within the first day. If that trend continues, Meridian is looking at 50 to 60% client attrition within the 30-day notice period. Thursday arrived with gray drizzle. Marcus drove to Meridian's offices in the Pearl District. The agency occupied the entire second floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and polished concrete. As he walked through the open workspace, he noted the atmosphere, tense, subdued. "They know something is wrong," Marcus observed. Nathan was already in the conference room, along with Victoria and a woman Marcus didn't recognize. "Marcus," Nathan said, "thanks for coming. This is Jennifer Morrison, our corporate attorney." "Let's get to it," Jennifer said, opening a folder. "Mr. Harding, we've reviewed the partnership agreement and the notices you sent to clients. While technically within your legal rights, I think we can all agree that the timing and execution were unnecessarily aggressive." "Aggressive?" Marcus noted. "She's trying to establish that my actions were emotionally motivated." "I followed the notification procedures outlined in the contract," Marcus said. "There was nothing aggressive about it. I provided the required notice period and answered client questions professionally." "You triggered a mass exodus," Nathan interjected. 32 clients have already submitted termination notices. That's devastation. 32, Marcus thought. 47% within 72 hours. Those clients exercised their contractual rights. Marcus said, "I didn't force anyone to terminate. I simply informed them of the partnership dissolution and their options." Victoria finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "This is vindictive, Marcus. You're destroying everything we built because I wanted a divorce. You told me you found my presence suffocating," Marcus said calmly. "You said you needed freedom to discover yourself among people who understood creativity and meaning. I gave you exactly what you asked for, complete independence from me, both personally and professionally. Don't twist my words. I'm not twisting anything. You wanted a divorce. I agreed immediately. You dismissed the business implications as just logistics. I'm handling the logistics. If the results are uncomfortable, that's because the partnership was more structurally important than you realized." Jennifer held up a hand. "Marcus, what would it take for you to reconsider the dissolution? Name your terms." "She thinks this is negotiation," Marcus observed. "There are no terms," Marcus said. "I don't want to maintain the partnership. Vantage is better positioned as an independent entity." "That's insane," Nathan said. "You're walking away from millions." "For what?" "I'm walking away from complexity and dependence," Marcus corrected. "Going forward, Vantage will work directly with clients who value our services. Simpler, cleaner, more efficient." "You're destroying our company," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "Everything Nathan and I built." Marcus met her eyes steadily. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm removing my infrastructure from a partnership that you decided should end. What you built, the creative capabilities, the client relationships, that all still exists. If those things have value independent of my analytics, you'll be fine." Her expression, Marcus noted, is the moment of realization. She's understanding that the partnership wasn't decorative, that what I provided wasn't just measurement, but the foundation that made her creativity commercially viable. We could develop our own analytics, Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Absolutely, Marcus agreed. You should explore those options. How long? Jennifer asked sharply. In your professional opinion, how long would it take them to rebuild comparable analytics infrastructure? It took me 5 years to build Vantage's current capabilities, Marcus said. You could potentially accelerate that with significant capital investment. Maybe get to viable functionality in 18 to 24 months. We don't have 18 months, Nathan said quietly. We have 36 employees, operational overhead running at $260,000 a month. If we lose 60% of our revenue, we're insolvent by June. And there it is, Marcus thought. The full comprehension. Nathan has run the numbers and understands what Victoria still doesn't. That Meridian survival was dependent on infrastructure they didn't own. Jennifer leaned forward. Marcus, if Meridian fails, Victoria loses everything. Her equity, her professional reputation, her career. You're potentially destroying her livelihood. Understand the implications, Marcus said. But Victoria made it very clear that our marriage was unsustainable, that my presence was suffocating her creative spirit. I'm providing that separation. The business consequences are unfortunate, but they're the natural result of the decision she made. Victoria stood abruptly. You're a monster. You're sitting there with that calm expression, using logic and contracts to destroy people, and you feel nothing. You're exactly what I said, a machine pretending to be human. Marcus remained seated. I feel quite a lot, Victoria, but I don't make business decisions based on feelings. You wanted out of our marriage because you found me boring. That's fine. We're incompatible. But you don't get to have both complete independence and continued access to my infrastructure. You asked for one, and you're getting it. This is revenge. This is consequences, Marcus corrected. You built a company on a foundation you didn't own, in partnership with someone you came to resent. Now you want the foundation without the partnership. That's not how structural dependencies work. Jennifer gathered her papers. Expect to hear from our litigation team. Feel free, Marcus said, standing. My attorney will respond to any formal actions. But you'll find I've complied exactly with the contract terms that your clients negotiated and signed. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, Victoria, I hope you find what you're looking for. The creative fulfillment, the artistic community, the authentic self. You deserve to be happy. Her expression was pure confusion. She can't reconcile my sincerity with her narrative of me as vindictive. 6 weeks later, Marcus sat in his office reviewing the quarterly projections. The transition had proceeded exactly as he'd anticipated. Methodical, efficient, predictable. Of the 68 clients who'd received termination notices, 51 had opted to work directly with Vantage. Vantage's revenue had increased by 42%. The company had hired 3 new analysts, expanded into additional office space, and Marcus had finally upgraded the server infrastructure. His phone buzzed. Nathan. Marcus. Nathan's voice was hollow. I need to ask you something. Would you consider licensing the technology back to us? Not a partnership, just a standard licensing agreement. We'd pay market rates, whatever you think is fair. We need something to offer clients, or we're finished. He's abandoned the litigation threats, Marcus thought. That's the sound of complete strategic collapse. I'm not interested in licensing to Meridian, Marcus said. The technology is proprietary, and I prefer to maintain control over its deployment. Right, of course. Nathan's laugh was bitter. You've won, Marcus. Completely. We're closing the agency. Victoria and I are selling what assets we can, paying out severance. The whole thing is done. I didn't win anything, Marcus said quietly. I just stopped participating in something that didn't make sense anymore. You know what the worst part is? Victoria was right about you. You really are a machine. You watched us build something beautiful, and then you dismantled it with the same emotional investment someone might have in canceling a subscription service. Beautiful, Marcus thought. He still sees it through the aesthetic lens. He never understood that beauty wasn't structurally sound without the foundation. What you built was impressive, Marcus said. The creative work, the client relationships, all of that was real. But it was built on infrastructure you didn't own and didn't value. When Victoria decided she needed complete independence from me, the infrastructure left with that independence. That's not dismantling. That's just how dependencies work. You could have stayed. You could have maintained the partnership even after the divorce. I could have, Marcus agreed. But why would I? Victoria made it clear she found me suffocating and boring. She wanted space to discover herself among more creative people. Staying in the partnership would have meant continuing to enable someone who resented my presence. That's not sustainable for anyone. Silence. For what it's worth, Nathan said eventually, I never thought you were boring. I knew what you brought to the partnership. I just didn't realize how dependent we were until it was gone. Most people don't, Marcus said. Infrastructure is invisible until it fails. That evening, as Marcus locked up and headed home, not to the loft in the Pearl, which was being sold, but to a smaller apartment in the Northwest District, he reflected on how much had changed in 2 months. Victoria had wanted liberation from her suffocating marriage. She'd gotten it, along with the collapse of her company. Nathan had wanted to ride Meridian's momentum to greater heights. Instead, he was learning about building on foundations you don't control. And Marcus? He had exactly what he'd always had: his work, his systems, his infrastructure. The difference was that now no one was asking him to pretend those things were less important than they were. No one was calling him boring or suffocating or passionless. He was simply the key man, the essential component that everyone had taken for granted until he left. The pretending is over, Marcus thought, and what remains is just mathematics. Cause and effect. Structural dependencies playing out exactly as the system predicted they would. He poured a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, his laptop already open. Outside, Portland's rain continued its steady percussion, the city indifferent to the small human dramas of marriage and divorce. Marcus Harding had been called many things over the years. Brilliant, boring, insufficiently creative, suffocating, a machine pretending to be human. But in the end, the only label that mattered was the one hidden in the contract language, the clause that Nathan had barely glanced at and Victoria had dismissed as mere logistics. The key man. And when you remove the key man from a system designed around his presence, the system simply stopped functioning. No malice required. No revenge necessary. Just the predictable mathematics of structural dependency playing out to their inevitable conclusion. The pretending was over. The consequences had cascaded. And Marcus Harding, the boring analytics guy with his passionless algorithms, had simply done what he'd always done, removed himself from situations that no longer made sense, and let the numbers speak for themselves.
Thanks for listening.